So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session. Today, we have a very interesting session for all of you international students who are thinking on and taking a master or a PhD in the Faculty of Engineering in the University of Waterloo in Canada. Of course, for many of you, as it was at some point as well for me, just we are interested to see what is the pathway, what can we do once we have our degree to have the permanent residency in Canada. So welcome. Today is Wednesday, December 13 of 2023. If you are watching this in a couple of years later, all these laws can change in the future, so it's important to know the date. So today we have Shannon Shang. She is an immigration consultant in the Student Success Office in the University of Waterloo. That's super expert to explain everything that you need to know with your study permit, your work permit, your immigration, everything. She will be the expert. Hopefully, when you're here in the University of Waterloo, you can meet her in person. We also have Ileana. She is the Recruitment and Digital Engagement Officer in Renison University College. If any of you need any support with your English skills, she will explain the options that you have. Also today in the chat, we have Emily. She is the Manager of Graduate Studies in Electrical and Computing Engineering. Also, to give you all the support to answer those questions, we have Annette. She is an Administrative Assistant for the Associate Dean, Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs. And I'm your host. I am Maria Sandoval. I am the Marketing and Recruitment Specialist in the Engineering Graduate Studies Office. Okay, so first thing, just before talking about everything about immigration, I just would like to guide you and advise you to visit our graduate studies page. We have all the information required, all the information that you need when you're planning to study in Canada. There is a section as well for international students. There is a section as well about how to find a supervisor, funding, housing, how to define what kind of program you want to take. So just please visit the Engineering Graduate Studies page. The Faculty of Engineering is the largest engineering school in Canada. We have 6 departments. We have Chemical Engineering, Civil and Environmental Engineering, Electrical and Computing Engineering, Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering, Management Science and Engineering, System Design Engineering. We also have 2 schools, Conrad School of Entrepreneurship and Business and the School of Architecture. Remember that here in Waterloo, 100% of the ideas developed at Waterloo are owned by their creators. So if you are one of these very smart, talented people, or you already have a business idea in your mind, Waterloo, the University of Waterloo is the place for you. Your ideas are your intellectual property, so that puts you in control to patent or license your idea, to commercialize it, or even to start your own company. This is one of the several reasons why you always see many entrepreneurs coming from the University of Waterloo. And this is unique from this university. In all the departments, you're going to find different kind of programs. You're going to find course-based programs and you're going to find research-based programs. So the course-based programs, we have 3. We have the Master of Engineering, we have the Master of Management Science, and the Master of Business Entrepreneurship and Technology. The Master of Engineering, all the departments, Chemical Engineering, Civil and Environmental, Electrical and Computer Engineering, Mechanical and Mechatronics, and System Design Engineering, all of them, they have a Master of Engineering, right? That's what we call MEng. And the Department of Management Science and Engineering, they have the Master of Management Science. And Conrad, they have the Master of Business Entrepreneurship and Technology, MBET. So this is more heavy on courses, 8 to 9 courses to increase your project management skills. If you're interested in a specific area, that can work, or you just can keep it general. It is self-funded. That is important. Many of them, if not all, they have co-op opportunities. So one of your terms, it can be about working. You will have a term where you will be able to work with a company. If you're interested in these co-op opportunities, you need to make a separate application to the regular MEng or MMSC. Also, we have graduate diplomas. We have a graduate diploma in electric power engineering. We have a graduate diploma in data analytics and a graduate diploma in business and entrepreneurship. So this is course-based. We also have research-based. All the 6 departments, they have the Master of Applied Science, MASC. This is 4 to 5 courses plus an original research and thesis. So, and here you are interested in any specific topic and you want to work in research. You want to work with a supervisor. And maybe you're thinking about taking a PhD in the future, or maybe you just want to develop research for industry. Both ways they work. It will take around 2 years to complete the Master of Applied Science, and there are funds available. Remember, for the course-based programs, there are no funds guaranteed, but here there are, because you're working with a supervisor and you're developing research. Also, we have something that we call collaborative programs that I will explain in a bit. Same thing if you're interested in PhD. So this is a little bit less courses, 3 to 4 courses. You have your research-based thesis and a comprehensive exam. It will take around 4 years to complete, and you have funds available for the supervisor and the university. There is an option as well if you want to apply directly to a PhD from your bachelor's, if you already have the skills and experience to do so. The collaborative programs are different programs that you can take within engineering, within a specific department, but also you will be taking classes with students from other faculties. So, for example, we have the collaborative program that only applies for research-based programs, Master of Applied Science and PhD in water. Here, you can look for programs in chemical engineering, in civil, and the School of Architecture. So you will be taking classes not only with students from these 3 departments in engineering, but also with students from all 6 faculties in arts, in engineering, and environment, in health, mathematics, and science. Same thing here with nanotechnology. So those are the departments involved. Nanotechnology is a big one, so we have several departments working there. And also you will have classes with students in the Faculty of Engineering and Science. Quantum information as well, that's another option. And aeronautics. So please just take a look to the departments and the programs available there, the Master of Applied Science and the PhD. In aeronautics, you will be taking classes as well with the students in the faculties on top of engineering, arts, environmental, health, mathematics, and science. To check all the admission requirements as well, just in the page that I mentioned at the beginning, you will find them all, or you can just scan this code. You also can find all the information about how to find a supervisor if you are interested in research-based program. There is a section for international students with all the admission requirements, the international grade equivalences, the English language requirements. So again, just please visit our graduate page, and this section is international students. When you see all the requirements to apply, you will see that English, of course, is one of the biggest requirements. The Faculty of Engineering is highly competitive, so sometimes the student doesn't get the score needed for that specific test. So in that case, it's like, what can I do? So here we have Ailiana, so she can explain us a little bit about this program.
Thank you, Maria. So EFAS, or English for Academic Success, is one of the programs or options that you can take to meet the English language requirement when you're applying for a graduate program. EFAS is really a unique program that offers students more than just English language instruction. Students who participate in EFAS not only improve their English language skills, but also do that in an integrated and dynamic manner that reflects what is truly needed to succeed in an academic and professional environment in general, not just English. And the good thing about EFAS is that it's benchmarked to the Common European Framework for Reference for Languages, which is a global standard in the English language proficiency. For example, you have probably heard about being in a B1 level or a C1 level. So EFAS has 4 levels, and level 300 is an equivalent to a high intermediate level, or B2. And the last level, which is 400, is an equivalent to an advanced level, or C1, which is what you need in order to meet the requirements for the program. The good thing about EFAS, other than being offered on campus, so you will have the experience of being at the University of Waterloo, is that if you successfully complete EFAS level 400, you are satisfying the English language requirements for studies at Waterloo, which includes masters and PhDs. On top of that, the University of Waterloo might offer conditional admission through EFAS to academically admissible applicants. That means if you are meeting all academic requirements and perhaps you still need a little bit of help with English, you can complete EFAS, and hopefully in future terms, you can have an offer. This is on a case-by-case basis, so just keep that in mind. But it's definitely another option if you know that you are not at that C1 level. A lot of our students come with a B2, so they have to do 2 terms of EFAS. And the program offers a student a number of unique program features, including targeted support for graduate students and prospective graduate students. So these include assistance with graduate admission applications, check-in meetings with our EFAS academic advisor. We also have support with adapting to academic life in Canada and the University of Waterloo, writing at a graduate level as well, and a number of informative workshops in areas such as self-directed learning strategies and how to use social media for professional networking. So it's a great opportunity for you, especially if you want to come to Waterloo and know what it's like and have that experience before going into your studies and know more about the university, and B, perhaps you are not at that level of English that you need, and this can definitely help you.
Okay, and just to remember, if you're interested in applying, the Faculty of Engineering, the next intake is September fall, so the deadline is February 1st. This following intake is winter, so the deadline to apply is June 1st, and the following intake is May, spring. The deadline to apply is October 1st. So for now, the next one is the intake in September 2024, so the deadline is February 2024.
Everyone should be able to see my screen now.
Yes.
So yeah, good morning and afternoon or evening, everyone. My name is Shannon, and I am one of the 6 immigration consultants at the Student Success Office at the University of Waterloo. I'm here to deliver the session for international students planning to take their master's or PhD in Canada and the pathways to potentially becoming a permanent resident in Canada. Do note, like Maria did say, immigration information does change very, very frequently. So as such, this information is valid as of this point, right? So as a disclaimer, information is accurate as of today's date on December 13th, 2023. So for today's agenda, we will go through, I saw some questions about the post-graduation work permit, who is eligible for a post-grad work permit, how long will your post-grad work permit be issued for, some permanent residence pathways specifically for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program in Ontario, the master's stream, the PhD stream, as well as the Express Entry Program, and just overall, just a brief session about our immigration consultant service at the University of Waterloo. So just looking at the post-graduation work permit. So what is the post-graduation work permit? It is an open work permit, which will allow you to work for any employer anywhere in Canada. You can apply for this only after you complete your program in Canada. This is a work permit that allows you to gain opportunity to gain work experience or Canadian work experience in Canada, which can assist you in qualifying you for permanent residency under one of the Canadian Experience Class streams. It is a once-in-a-lifetime open work permit, which means that you can only be issued once. So if you're planning to do further studies in Canada, for example, you're in a master's program right now and you plan on doing a PhD study, you may want to consider holding off on applying for this work permit until after you finish. And one of the main eligibilities is that it requires full-time and continuous studies. So just looking at the eligibility criteria for the post-graduation work permit is that you must hold a valid temporary status, so either a study permit or a valid visitor status, or you have left Canada at the time of applying for the post-grad work permit. You must have maintained full-time student enrollment status, with the exception of the last and final term, which can be part-time. You must have completed a program that is at least 8 months in duration, which all of our master's program and PhD program will be at least 8 months long, if not longer. And you must apply within the validity date of your program completion. You're not eligible for the post-graduation work permit if your program is less than 8 months, if you've previously held or been issued a post-grad work permit, if you completed majority of your credits towards the completion of the program via distance learning, so a lot, like let's say more than 50% of your program was online, then you won't be eligible. Or if you completed a program of study granted by a non-Canadian institution located in Canada, or you received funding from the Global Affairs Canada or participated in government partnerships, awards, programs, and there is a list on the RCC webpage on the postgrad work permit policy page. So how long will the post-graduation work permit be issued for, right? So the length of your post-graduation work permit is determined by the program length stated in the completion letter or on the completion letter at the time of you applying for the post-graduation work permit. So for example, master's students with program length of 12 months, your post-graduation work permit may be issued for 12 months. For master's students with program length of 16 to 23 months without scheduled breaks, your post-graduation work permit may be issued for 3 years. And for master's students with program lengths of over 24 months, so these are generally co-op or thesis-based students, your post-grad work permit may be issued for up to 3 months or 3 years. And for PhD students, because your program length will be longer than 24 months, your post-graduation work permit may be issued for 3 years. So 3 years is the maximum duration of the post-graduation work permit. So jumping into the permanent residency pathways. So there are 2 different permanent residency pathways. So it is really through the economic classes or the non-economic classes. So some examples of the economic classes will include the most popular program for international students, which is Express Entry System, which manages economic immigration programs such as the Federal Skilled Workers, the Federal Skilled Trades, the Canadian Experience Class, and a portion of the provincial nominee programs are assessed under Express Entry. Other economic classes will include the provincial nominee program that's separate from Express Entry, self-employed persons, Quebec economic program, the caregiver classes, and we'll go through the highlighted ones during the session. And some of the non-economic classes that you may fall under, right, like may include the family class sponsorship if you have a spouse or a partner who is a Canadian or a permanent resident of Canada. You may fall under the humanitarian and compassionate considerations. If you're a protected person, if you're a Hong Kong citizen, there is currently a permanent residence pathway as well. Or if you are a temporary resident permit holder, you may also qualify for permanent residency under that class. This is just to name a few of the non-economic programs. So now jumping into Express Entry. So just an overview of what Express Entry is that it only skilled work experience such as tier 0, 1, 2, or 3 qualifies you for Express Entry. You must pass an approved language test, and this result must be valid at the time that you submit your Express Entry profile, so the initial stages, and at the time that you submit your final permanent residence application. About every 2 weeks, IRCC does complete a draw where they provide a comprehensive ranking system score, so the CRS cutoff score. And if your score is at or above the cutoff score, you'll receive an invitation to apply. You can track the draws or the cutoff scores on the IRCC website. They are open to the public to view. And you will remain in the Express Entry pool for 1 year. And if you don't receive the invitation to apply within this time frame, your profile will expire, but it's okay. You can always recreate a new one. So just looking at a very quick overview of the comprehensive ranking system criteria. So it is out of 1,200 points. There is a QR code here that will directly bring you to the government webpage that will go through the points breakdown, such as the age, the level of education, your official language proficiency, the Canadian work experience, skill transferability factors, and any additional points that you may receive, such as the post-secondary education in Canada, after you complete your master's or PhD in Canada. So jumping into the Federal Skilled Worker stream. So this is one of the programs that are under the Express Entry program. The requirements is that your skilled work experience must be in the same type of job, so the same tier code as the job that you want to use for your immigration application. So this is called your primary application. This must be either from in Canada or elsewhere within the last 10 years. So this has to be paid work experience as well. So volunteer work experience or unpaid internships do not count for this program. The main criteria for this work experience is that it must be at least 1 year of continuous work experience. So that means no gaps in your employment. So to be considered, it must be either full-time at one job for 30 hours a week, for 12 months in a row, equal amounts in part-time work, as long as it adds up to the full-time equivalent, or full-time at one or more jobs. For example, you were, let's say, a software engineer for one company for 6 months, and then you transfer directly to another company for 6 months as a software engineer as well, and there's no gaps in time, then you may potentially qualify for this program. You will also need to do, like I said, the language test, either the English or French test, and score at least a minimum of CLB 7 in all 4 abilities. You must also provide proof of education, proof of funds, and also score at least 67 points in the Federal Skilled Workers Selection Factor points grid, which is a separate point factor. And just to learn more about the program specifically, I also have a QR code here that directly links you to the government page for the Federal Skilled Worker Program. And looking at the Canadian Experience class stream, it requires at least 1 year of skilled work experience in Canada in the last 3 years. And what they mean by in Canada is that you must be physically in Canada and physically present in Canada working for a Canadian company. And this skilled work can be either full-time at one job, equal amounts in part-time that's equivalent to that full-time work experience, or full-time at more than one job. The good thing about this program is that it doesn't need to be 1 year of continuous work. Okay, so it could be a 6-month contract here, and then you have a break of one month, and then you do another 6 months. So it's just a cumulative of 1 year of work experience. The minimum English or French test really depends on your occupation code, and the minimum is really CLB 7 for those that are in Tier 0 or 1 jobs, and the CLB 5 for those that are in Tier 2 or 3 jobs. But because Express Entry is a point-based system and it's all based on how well you score on the language test, you want to not just meet the minimum language cutoff, but do as best as you can to get the maximum score. And just for another note is that this stream is designed for skilled workers who have Canadian work experience, and your work experience must have been attained while you have a valid work permit. You must also intend to live outside of Quebec, and you cannot use self-employment or work experience that you're gained while you're a full-time student towards this program. And what it means to be admissible is that you're not criminally or medically inadmissible to Canada, right? So just another QR code here to bring you directly to the government website on the Canadian Experience class. And now we are jumping into the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program is the province of Ontario's economic immigration program. So this is completely separate from the Express Entry program that governs some provincial nominee applications. It allows applicants who are established in Ontario to apply for a provincial nomination from the Ontario government directly. And once you're nominated, applicants are able to apply for permanent residency through the RCC application under the regular provincial nominee program. So they have a separate PR portal. In Ontario, for 2023, Ontario had issued about 5,734 invitations to apply for those that graduated from a master's graduate stream. And in 2023, for the PhD stream, they have issued 486 invitations. And just going into the requirements for the master's graduate stream is that you must complete at least a 1-year full-time master's program that is eligible from an eligible institution in Ontario. So Waterloo is an eligible institution. You must apply within 2 years of obtaining your master's degree. Normally, students will apply shortly after they complete their program. For master's graduate program candidates, you will have to complete a language test as well and meet that minimum CLB 7 or higher. You must also show enough funds to support yourself or your family if applicable, and you must be living in Ontario for at least 1 year in the past 2 years before you apply, and this can be cumulative. And you must be living in Ontario at the time of application or be outside of Canada. And you must also show intentions to live in Ontario. Note, though, you cannot be studying full-time at the time of submission unless you are also working full-time. So if you are looking at doing your PhD studies shortly after completing your master's, you may not be eligible for this program. And you also won't qualify for this program if you received a bursary or a grant or a scholarship that requires you to return home after you earn your master's degree. And you can only apply after you fulfilled those commitments and can demonstrate an intention to live in Ontario. And again, there's a QR code that links you directly to the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program page to the Master's Graduate Stream. And just looking at the PhD graduate stream requirements, it requires a completion of a PhD program from an eligible institution in Ontario. And again, Waterloo is an eligible institution. It requires that at least 2 years of your PhD must be completed while you were legally living and studying in Ontario. You must also show enough funds to support yourself and your family if applicable. And you must also complete this residency requirement in Ontario that you've lived at least for that 1 year. You must show intentions to live in Ontario, and you must apply within 2 years of obtaining your PhD degree. And you noticed here that the master's graduate stream requires you to complete a language test, but for the PhD stream, it doesn't actually require the language test. It isn't mandatory, but if you require it for point purposes, you may want to consider getting that done. And again, you won't qualify if you received a bursary or a grant or a scholarship that requires you to return home after you've earned your PhD degree. And again, like I said, no language test is required, but the language test can be taken for additional points. And the QR code here will direct you to the PhD or the direct Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program page for the PhD stream. So just going over the overview of how you apply, for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So once you meet the requirements for the PhD or the master's stream, you must register for an expression of interest. So that's called an EOI using the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program e-filing portal. You are also required to complete an attestation form on the same day that you register for the EOI. In the form, you're required to attest that you meet all of the stream requirements on the date that you submitted the EOI. The attestation form will also need to be uploaded with your Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program application after if you receive an invitation to apply, so an ITA. And your EOI will remain valid for up to 12 months or until either you have received an invitation to apply or you withdraw your registration. And just looking at the overall scoring factors, so you will get scored based on having a valid work or study permit status at the time of applying, your previous earning history in Canada, your highest education, your field of study. So all of you, if you are going to be applying for engineering, Ontario is currently looking for engineers, right? So they are getting the maximum points for that. And for Canadian education, you will also get some points for that. Language ability, regionalization, something that I do want to stress is that Waterloo also gets a lot of points for regionalization being outside the GTA. So if you are looking at studying at Waterloo, this is quite an advantage that you will have. And just another overview. So if you receive an invitation to apply, you must submit an application on the Ontario e-filing portal within 14 calendar days, and all required documents must be uploaded with your application. The application fee for the PhD and the master's graduate stream is $1,500. In addition to the mandatory documents to meet the stream criteria, you may also need to upload additional documents if you're claiming points for scoring factors in your EOI. So for example, like I said, PhD students applying for this program do not require a language test, but if you want to complete one for additional points, this is the additional document that you'll need to upload. And it takes approximately 60 to 90 days for the processing of the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So if your application is approved, you will receive a nomination approval letter and a nomination certificate by email. And once it's approved, you will need to apply through the final permanent residence application through the IRCC's portal within 6 months and include both your nomination approval letter as well as the nomination certificate and mandatory PR documents like the medical, police certificates. And you must apply online by creating a permanent residence online application portal account. In addition, you will need to pay the federal fee, which is generally about $1,365 per person, per applicant. And the permanent residence application processing for this final stage is approximately 15 months. And just quickly, just going over the immigration consulting services at the University of Waterloo. So you can connect with us as soon as you have accepted your offer and are matriculated into the University of Waterloo system. So you must have a student ID to be able to book an appointment with us or submit a web form. So although we do not assist with initial study permit applications submitted from outside of Canada, just due to the complexities of outside Canada and country-specific requirements, we can assist you with general questions that you may have related to your study permit application. And once you are approved to enter Canada and start your studies for all temporary resident immigration matters during your studies, please do connect with us. We are a team of 6 immigration consultants, and we offer about 30 appointments each day. And our services are also available to you for 2 extra terms after you complete your final term of studies. This is just to ensure that you're well on your way, you have your postgrad work permit, you have your visa, right, and potentially answer any general questions you have on permanent residency. And just to conclude, we do not advise on specific permanent residency applications, but we can definitely direct you to the correct resources and answer any general questions that you may have during your time at the university. Okay. So thank you for having me.
That is great. I think, Shannon, you mentioned it before that that's kind of special from the University of Waterloo, that we are able to give support to international students with this once you are accepted and once you are matriculated in the university, to give you support with all those questions, because it is complex to understand all this about immigration. Thank you so much, Shannon, for your time. So for now, you can stop sharing your screen, and I will start reading the questions that we have left. So Gabrielle is asking, do we have to stay at Ontario after getting ONIP for master's stream?
Yeah, so basically, if you're looking at applying for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, is that you must have intentions to live in Ontario, stay in Ontario, right? So in most cases, at the time of you applying for permanent residency for this program, is that you must be in Ontario at the time of applying, right? And generally, because your permanent resident application is on the basis of you staying in Canada, even as a PR, like the requirement is that you remain in Ontario. Okay, but like as a PR, there are freedom of movement, right? So generally after a couple of years, right, is that some students do move on, right? But there isn't, like immigration can come back, right, and just say, you don't meet the eligibility criteria anymore, right? So generally you'll want to remain in Ontario for that.
Just in case you want to be here to wait for a bit. Yeah. Josary is asking, as students can work plus 20 hours up until April 24, can we take up opportunities even though our programs doesn't include this practical? Except, will the university support us? I'm not sure I understand that question.
Yeah, because it may be a current student that's asking this question, right? Because there is a policy right now that allows students who have a valid study permit as of December 7th, 2023, to be able to work off campus, right, for over 20 hours a week. And potentially, as long as you're enrolled as a full-time student, that eligibility criteria may apply to you. But I would suggest booking an appointment with us, okay? That way we can assess your situation in a little bit more details.
That's great. There you go. Hemant is asking, co-op work experience period is calculated for PR?
So good question. So for under the Canadian Experience class, right, like any work that you do while you're enrolled as a full-time student doesn't actually count towards Canadian work experience. Okay, so Canadian work experience will need to be after you actually hold a valid work permit and you're no longer enrolled as a full-time student.
Yeah, that's one of my questions. While we are I understand you that the work experience that counts is until you hold a work permit. But before, as you're a student, then that's why it doesn't count. Am I correct?
Exactly, yeah. So it may potentially count towards federal skilled worker, okay, which is a separate program, but be aware, right, like that program requires continuous work, okay? So if, let's say, you had 12 months of continuous co-op, which I know Waterloo doesn't have a back-to-back-to-back co-op opportunity, right, is that potentially that could count you for federal skilled worker, right? But it's very hard to calculate, right? So you just have to make sure you meet the eligibility.
Perfect. Um, you were mentioning in the programs about the intention to live in Ontario. The anonymous attendee is asking, can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so definitely one of the documents that you'll need to provide to submit your Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program is intentions to live in Ontario, right? So those are any ties that you have in Ontario, right? So for example, I completed my master's in Ontario, that's a tie, right? I have a lease agreement currently living in Ontario, that's a tie that I have to Ontario, right? Other things could be I have family members in Ontario, I have a community in Ontario, I've joined a lot of clubs in Ontario, so proof of that could also be showing intentions that you want to stay in Ontario, right? Another big one is also employment. Okay, so if you have employment and your employer's in Ontario, that's a really big factor, right? That will lead Ontario to thinking that yes, you are planning on remaining in Canada and establishing yourself in Ontario. Mm-hmm.
It's showing that you are living here. Justin is asking, usually how long does it take to get PMP via master's graduate stream once the application is completed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you are competitive, right, and you get a notification of interest to submit a Ontario immigration application, right, is that it takes about 60 to 90 days to get the actual certificate. And after you get the certificate, you have about 6 months to apply for your permanent residence application. And that final permanent residence application takes about 15 months. Okay, so generally, I would say overall the processing time from start to finish, if you're lucky to get the invitation, is about 18 months.
We have some idea. We'll jump to Jung is asking, hi, this might sound like a weird question, but I'm really curious about whether the change in immigration policy after the 2025 election will affect me if I graduate in 2026 or I'm eligible for the policies in my entry year. Thanks for your reply.
That's definitely a very, very hard question to answer, right? Because elections do tend to change immigration policies and new policies are always coming out, right? And we've been hearing changes to post-graduation work permit eligibility may also be a factor, right? And they're potentially looking at labor market in Canada specifically, right? And it may be impacting the eligibility for the post-grad work permit, but we really don't know until the policy comes out, right? So hard to say, right? Like what may happen, but if changes do happen, they usually give some sort of retroactive, or they may put a date, right? Like on when it comes into effect, right? So hopefully it doesn't impact you, but hard to say, right? So always, if you're accepted to Waterloo, just connect with us all the time, right? Because we're happy to go through any updates, right, that you may find on your end, any updates we know on our end, right, just to give you the most accurate information as of that time.
Yeah, that is great, because at the moment that's very important for you. Like when you're applying and then you're like, who to ask to, then there you go. You have a full staff of immigration consultant that can help you once you're here. Javier is asking, is the processing time for PR through the Ontario nomination program 15 months fixed time, or does it change based on the number of applications being processed?
It's I would say that consistently it has been about 15 months for the past year. Okay, but it does fluctuate, right, depending on immigration changes. Okay, so before the new immigration change, right? Like before, Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program was a paper-based application, and when you applied through the PR stream, it was also paper-based, right? So as of that time, before last year, is that it was upwards of 20 months of processing. Okay, but ever since this new year is that they changed to an online processing, which has actually sped up the application process. So hopefully it does remain this way. So no way of really knowing, right? Like judging processing times, but as temporary resident applications do fluctuate, right? Like we're looking at permanent residence applications also fluctuating as well. But I would say it probably won't fluctuate as much as temporary resident applications.
Anonymous attendee is asking, does the OINP master's stream require working experience in Canada?
Not at all. Okay, this is why the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program is so competitive. okay, is that it really doesn't require work experience, right? The only points that you may get points for is that if you've worked for at least $40,000, right, in the past year, right? So that would give you an extra 3 points for your assessment of the score. But generally, it doesn't require a job offer or employment in Ontario.
Can dependents be included in the OINP application? How does the point system work for them?
Okay, so the good thing about Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program is that your dependents won't be considered in the scoring factor. Okay, so the scoring factor is all about the main applicant, right? And your dependents can definitely be included. They will ask you about your marital status, and then from there, you will need to provide the passport pages of your dependents in your Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So not to worry, they'll definitely be included with your PR application. The scoring factor for express entry, though, does differ for if you're including your spouse or not. The points will just be different in that calculation.
Said is asking, is it required to have language test results for the PMP? I got nomination from the province without test results, but when I am applying to federal, the language test is required document. Can you elaborate on this?
Okay, so I guess you did apply for the PhD stream probably, right? So in most cases, if the provincial nominee application doesn't require you to complete a mandatory language test, right, then you won't actually need to submit a language test result through the final PR application, right? So there should be like a bolded statement in the document checklist of the final PR application that basically states as required by the province, right? So the eligibility of the province.
Danielle is asking, if my PGWP is only 1 year, how can I wait 18 months to get my PR approved? Can I still stay legally in Canada?
Very good question, right? So if you do end up submitting the final permanent residence application, right? So let's say, you were under express entry, you got invited, and then you submitted the final permanent residence application while you still hold a valid work permit, is that you may potentially be eligible for this thing called a bridging open work permit, right? So a bridging open work permit is an application where you can apply for a work permit to bridge the time that you're waiting for your permanent residence application to be processed. Okay, so if you've done that, right, is that you'll be legally able to continue to stay in Canada and to work in Canada. Okay, but if you still haven't submitted your final application for permanent residency, is that potentially you may be looking at other alternatives to remain in Canada, which may be changing your status to a visitor or getting employment assistance to get a employer-specific work permit. Or some students, if that opportunity is no longer there, is that permanent residency, you can still submit the application from outside of Canada or await the processing from outside of Canada, right? Like you'll just need to submit a change of address, right? Like I'm now no longer in Canada, I'm outside of Canada, so that it becomes an outside Canada processing.
So here I'm answering the questions as well. Okay. Here we have. Can you complete your express entry form at the same time as filling the EOI?
Okay, so this is basically asking about two separate programs, right? So if you're eligible for express entry, you can definitely submit a profile for express entry, right? And if you also are eligible for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, you can also submit let's say the Master's Graduate Stream application. Okay, so as long as they are two different, completely separate applications, so express entry and then the provincial nominee program, is that you can actually have two applications simultaneously. But generally, we would say whoever gives you the invitation, whether it's express entry or the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, stick with that one because you may not want to be paying double the fees, right? Like for two of the applications simultaneously.
Okay. Temple is asking, do I still require proof of funds if there is funding for the PhD program?
So generally, you are probably looking at the study permit application, right? So study permit application, yes, you will still need to provide proof of funding, right? So it would probably be the letter, the offer letter, right? Like that would confirm how much funding you're receiving. And generally, immigration may also want to see if you have funds readily available, okay? Like just to support yourself for any other living expenses that you may incur while you're in Canada.
Perfect. I think it's a little bit going back, but does TA and RA experience count towards work experience for the Ontario nominee program?
Mm-hmm. So the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, like I said, doesn't require any sort of work experience. But if you are looking at the potential points that you get for the salary of $40,000 in your notice of assessment, is that yes, TA and RA positions, if you worked about $40,000, right, like for that position in the last, and that appears on your notice of assessment, right, then you may potentially get the 3 extra points for that.
Does, in the same direction, does COP count towards PGWP time, or is it only course time?
Good question. Okay, so basically, if you are in a co-op program, okay, your length of program will likely change. Okay, so for example, there are course-based, let's say, Eng program, right? Like those course-based programs are 16 months without scheduled break programs. Whereas if you're in a co-op program, they are considered either 20 months or beyond, right? Like programs, right? So in that case, yes, definitely, as long as you get a co-op approved position during your co-op work terms, they do count towards the length of your postgrad work permit.
Perfect. Here there is a question with the magic answer, but as we were explaining here, there are several ways how you can get the PR. But anyways, what is the ideal strategy for a student who's coming for master's in engineering at Waterloo to get PR, and how much time it will take?
Yeah, so it really depends on your kind of like your personal circumstances, right? Like whether you have foreign work experience, right? If you don't have foreign work experience, then potentially I would say go with the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program stream, just simply because it doesn't require any work experience, right? Like all it requires is that you complete your master's program in Ontario and that you meet the cutoff score, right? So very laid back, which would mean that program is also very competitive, and that program also does change from year to year. Okay, so once you're a student, right, like we do also do information sessions every term on the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program for Masters and PhD students, as well as the Express Entry programs. So just be sure to, attend one of those, register for one of those, just to get the most updated information as of that point. But yeah, it really depends on your circumstances. Some students, they go directly through the Federal Skilled Worker stream if they do have a lot of foreign work experience, right? So all depends on your personal circumstances.
It really depends. That's why there are several programs. So it's about trying to understand. It's heavy to read all that information, but it really depends. And once, anyways, you are here at Waterloo, there is Shannon and her team can always support you. Do you know some cutoff points for the Ontario Immigration Nominee Program Master's stream from previous years?
Yeah, so definitely. So even in 2023, right, like there has been at least 5 draws, right? And the maximum points that it's gone up to was at 52 points, right? And generally, like I would say, a lot of master's students that complete master's program in Waterloo specifically, right, in the engineering program, right, and if you score very highly on your language tests, right, like you should at least get 52 points. Okay, so it's very competitive, right? And the good thing about, like I said, University of Waterloo is that we're outside the GTA. Okay, so regionalization points are very high, right? Like for those that are outside the GTA, right? So you'll get a lot of points for that, right? But yeah, so averagely, I would say like the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program this year has been about 42 points. So yep, you're going to be pretty competitive as of today's date, but that can't be sure, right? Can't guarantee what's going to happen next year, right? Because they may change some things, right? Depending on the labor market.
I think you mentioned about this. Is it possible to apply for the Ontario Immigration Nominee Program after master's and before starting the PhD?
Yep. So one of basically the master's requirement is that you're not a full-time student at the time of applying and at the time of the final submission of your permanent resident application. Okay. So if you're looking to, let's say, become a PR first, right? So you finish your master's, you apply for your postgrad work permit, and then you apply for the permanent residence application. You wait out the, let's say, 15 to 18 months, and then afterwards you want to do your PhD. That's completely fine, right? So it's more just at the time of you applying for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program and at the time of finalization of your permanent residence application, right? Like you shouldn't technically be studying full time because they are looking at you contributing as a worker to the Ontario economy, right? So that's what the program really is about.
Sean Gang, I'm sorry, is asking, after I graduate from master's degree, can I stay work in Canada after submitting the EOI? I already used my PGWP after I got my bachelor's degree.
Okay, so unfortunately, it really depends on whether your postgrad work permit is still going to be valid at the time that you are finishing your master's, right? Because like I said, right, like you won't be able to apply for a bridging open work permit until after you submit the final stages of your permanent residence application, right? So in most cases, if let's say your postgrad work permit application your postgrad work permit is expiring before you complete your master's, then really there isn't any ways to bridge your stay in Canada, right? So you may either apply as a visitor, right, like to remain in Canada as a visitor, but you won't be able to work, right? Or you just leave Canada and apply from outside of Canada, right? So both these programs, the master's and the PhD stream, right, does allow you to apply from outside of Canada.
Perfect. We just have space for a few more questions. You see, if a co-op starts January 10 and finish by December 10, will it be count as 1 year and for FSW?
So basically, it has to be from start to finish 1 year continuous work, right? So technically, it should be January 1st to December 31st, right? So in that case, you might actually be missing 1 month, right? Like for the federal skilled worker. But like most of like University of Waterloo co-op programs is that I don't believe, right, there are 3 back-to-back co-op work terms that are available. Generally, it's 2 back-to-back maximum, right? But that may be something you discuss, right, like with your program coordinators.
Herman is asking, IELTS exam score is okay for Ontario nominee program?
Yep. So IELTS General, right, like is the language test that you'll need to complete for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program.
There you go. Gwen is asking, what if I did a graduate diploma or obtain an Ontario postgraduate certificate for a 2-year program? Please, what stream is available for permanent residents?
Yep. So that would likely be like under the regular express entry programs, right? Because the Ontario Immigrant Nominee programs, they're strictly for the master's or PhD stream, right? Like there are also other programs in Ontario that would be employer sponsor. So there's a lot of sponsorship from the employer that would be required for that specific program. But generally, for those that are not in master's or PhD, right, like it's really just the express entry being the most popular stream.
Perfect. If applying for Ontario Immigration Nominee Program and if job offer is from different state, then will I be eligible?
So you're looking at job offer from, I guess, a different province then, right? Province or territory, right? So generally, basically, the main criteria for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, like I said kind of before, right, is the ties that you have to Ontario, right? So if you are working for, let's say, like a job offer that's in British Columbia, right, and you end up relocating to British Columbia, is that your ties are no longer there for Ontario, right, which may be pretty detrimental to your application, okay, like for your Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, just simply because you don't have a lot of strong ties to Ontario.
If my PGWP is expired, can I apply for bridge work permit before I graduate from my master's program?
So bridging open work permit requires you to submit the final permanent residence application. Okay, so if you aren't eligible for permanent residency, right, and you haven't, or if you're eligible but you haven't submitted the actual final permanent residence application, is that you won't be eligible for the bridging open work permit.
Could I move to another province after getting a PR using the Ontario Immigration Nominee Program?
Yeah, generally, like I said, the basis of that application is you have intentions to reside and establish yourself in Ontario, right? So even as a PR, technically you have freedom of movement, right? But they can come back at any time and say, are you living in Ontario? What's happening, right? So anything can happen, right? So I would probably say if you're looking at really applying for this Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, right, is that establish yourself in Ontario for at least a few years after you become a PR.
And here we just have one question about the EFAS program for Ileana. For the EFAS program, we can first take it and then choose a master program, or do we need admission of the program first?
No, you will take the program first. You will take EFAS first. It really depends on how many levels you need. So, for example, if you need 2 levels, you can come do EFAS, and while doing EFAS, start your application for the master's. But it's definitely a step that you take before applying.
Okay, so it is 11. Thank you so much. Thanks to Shannon, Eliana, superstars, Annette, and Emily answering everything in the chat as well. I think this is a very useful session for everybody who's interested in taking their masters and PhDs in the Faculty of Engineering and the University of Waterloo in Canada. And when we are interested about the pathways, what are the options to get a permanent residence. So this is super useful if that's okay. It's very useful. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy your day. Happy holidays for everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.